Kicking off the list at number 10, Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Just off the coast of what is now North Carolina, back in August 1587, around 100 English settlers arrived to Roanoke Island. John White, governor of the new colony, had to sail back to England to grab supplies. But while he was away, a naval war broke out between England and Spain, so his commute was delayed just a tad, you know. He got back 3 years later in 1590 with said supplies. He's like, hey, sorry I'm late, we got some naval war traffic, you know how it is. Upon arrival, however, nobody was there anymore, including his wife, daughter, granddaughter, anybody. Among the 100 or so inhabitants, they all vanished. The only hint as to where they went or what even happened was the words Croatoan and Crow carved into a wooden post, and CRO on a tree. Now Croatoan or Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on the island as well. But after looking for evidence, theories, even archaeological exploration, experts still can't figure this one out. I've actually been to this island back when I was 16, so this one really creeped me out, not gonna lie. That's why I wanted to start with this one. Number 9, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. It's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars. It's all naturally fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease. Number 8, Catalhoyuk. Another ancient city, another ancient mystery. This time we're looking at what's currently south-central Turkey. About 9,000 years ago, it looked a lot different. Catalhoyuk was popping off until 7,000 years ago, but again, we have no clue what really happened. The most interesting tidbit of history here is the way that this ancient civilization built their homes. They made houses side by side, really close together, and as fitting as it is for this channel, you would say it was almost like a hive-like system. They didn't have doors, they didn't have mail slots or welcome mats. Instead, they had holes on their roofs. That's how they got in and out every day. So yeah, they would use ladders to get in and out, which I gotta say sounds pretty exhausting. They're probably all pretty ripped. Number 7, Mayans. One of the most advanced civilizations on this list, the Maya, were somehow able to create these massive stone structures in the middle of southern Mexico jungles. Next to the Egyptian pyramids, I'd say these are almost just as popular at this point. One of the most interesting pieces of the Maya, I'm sure as we all recall, was their calendar and the way that they worked it. I mean, we made a movie about 2012. The news was talking about 2012. Literally 12 years after Y2K, we're like, what if it happens again? Like, you know, this time seems serious. It's not gonna happen. We're good for now. We're gonna probably end ourselves before a calendar or, you know, a movie does. The Yucatan jungles are filled with pyramids and beautiful complex monuments lost in time, but where did the builders go and why did they leave? Well, a couple scientists analyzed rock samples around these areas and they were able to study the water levels in nearby lakes, suggesting that the reason the Mayans disappeared were not aliens, but rather they collapsed because of a drought. That checks out. Aliens are cool, you know, and the calendar stuff's cool, but no, they're just drought. Number 6, Göbekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkey city Urfa, Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. They are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Yeah, it's nuts. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. Because this area in the world, I mean now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every single direction. Herds of beautiful animals racing by, fields of barley and wheat. It would have looked like a temple from Legend of Zelda. Masterpiece. It was actually first discovered back in the 1960s by university anthropologists. They were doing a survey of the region, found this place, and assumed it was an ancient cemetery and then nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Now cut to 1994, best year ever, Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made and there was much, much more to it. Number 5, Clovis. We're taking a look at some mammoth hunters for this next point. This civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint. Now they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to use for shelter, but also clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, the Ice Age ought to do some damage. Number 4. Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1800s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings as well on the sides of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls, by the way, housed up to hundreds of residents. They were huge. What's now present-day Massa Verde National Park was pretty intense back in those days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, thousands of years later, see, back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led the Anasazi to violence, and perhaps they just wiped each other out. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either or. Number 3. Easter Islanders. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not carnival cruise ships, but canoes, like little canoes, and then somehow traveled all the way to Easter Island, over 2,000 miles away from Chile. That feat in itself is impressive. When you start to really think about the Easter Island heads on that island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds of them at one point, reached up to 32 feet high and weighed over 82 tons. It was a sight to see until the 1800s, because that's when the civilization vanished. But what happened? Well, many of these statues were destroyed during this time as well, so history doesn't really tell us much. The population was decreased drastically, and the island higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, were all overthrown. Well, what happened to them may give us some ideas for the future. See, Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before those seeds could enter the earth again, rats ate them all. These guys ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So naturally, a civil war began, everyone was freaking out, plus starvation. Also plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. Then around the 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. Number 2. Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and when they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was so excited. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, but what actually happened to Greenland Vikings? There's a huge mystery around them. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with a large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. Yeah. So now we have two colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that still stand to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings or so. That's incredible, that's a lot of Vikings. But later on in 1721, a missionary expedition arrived, and there were not 5,000 Vikings, in fact there were 0 Vikings. Archaeologists did the digging, and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD, and just decades later the eastern settlement was, well, simply abandoned. And there's also a handful of family fun movies that hint at what happened to them as well. The Ice Age, well, the small one in the 14th century, but still an ice age nonetheless. Number 1, the Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies. Also referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Indus, were actually quite large. We're talking about Vikings in the thousands, but the Indus reached about 5 million. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, be it Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentist came from the Indus Valley, so thank you. Something way more interesting though than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, meaning there were no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts, those are always fun and confusing. The Indus had a language that we're slowly but surely decoding today, but even so there's still around 250 to 500 characters that remain a mystery. Number 10. Sacred books. The Romans paved the way for many following civilizations, okay? They invented surgical tools, they invented medicine on the battlefield, and before this era, literature took the form of a tablet or a scroll. The Romans, they created the codex. Pages stacked on top of one another, just bound pages. The reason you have homework right now to be doing instead of watching this. It's all thanks to the ancient Romans. The early codex was bound wax, and then it moved to animal skin. This was a big step because early Christians used this new invention to produce copies of the Bible. Important pieces of history, so rightfully so, they had to be locked away from the public. Now back when King Tarquin ruled Rome, a local woman offered the Etruscan king 9 books. Now these books were ignored at first, but upon its second glance, the beat up manuscripts foretold the rise and fall of Rome. So for most of its time, these spoiler-filled manuscripts were held in the Temple of Jupiter. So if anybody wants to do National Treasure 3, I have some ideas, just saying. We could do like 9 installments. And number 9, corrupt fire department. Oh, here we go. When we think back to ancient times, it's not long before we come across an ancient blaze or some ancient wild tragedy where you're like, oh my god, how did that even happen? Something that reminds you that it wasn't always a party, okay? It was rarely a party, in fact. When we think of Julius Caesar when regarding the leadership of Rome, we often forget Marcus Crassus. He was powerful and full of bright ideas on the sidelines. Marcus ran the fire brigade. A lot of open fires, a lot of accidents happening at this time, so of course we need responders. But back then, these officials arrived on site to this blazing emergency, but before helping out, Crassus would demand the owner sells their property to him first. Yeah, watch it burn or sell it for a not so handsome price. The choice is yours. And also you have 38 seconds to decide. TikTok. Number 8, ancient drag. I'll respect a girl's night out, okay? Always. I get it. My guy friends have ruined most nights out that I've had in the city, because guys are dumbasses. That's a fact. Ancient Romans were ahead of the game with this one as well. That's why they made the festival of the good goddess women only. Yeah, statues of men weren't even allowed to partake. Statues depicting men at this festival had to be draped. Yeah, none of us were seeing anything. But then in comes Mr. Jealous, Mr. Ancient FOMO himself. Enter Publius Clodius Pulcher, okay? This man disguised himself as a flute lady, but when he didn't play the flute, and also wasn't a lady, and also nobody knew him, it was a little obvious that an intruder was present. A trial soon followed and the festival was then suspended. See, guys ruin the party, even in ancient Roman days. This dude's like, nah, I'm gonna go ruin it. Number 7, sewer goddess. I love reading about ancient gods. It's my favorite topic. The Roman god of manure and fertilizer, for example. Where was that one in Hades? That would have been helpful. I would have beat that game in 8 minutes flat with him. The god of toilets. There's one we can't forget about either. Crepitus, okay? Every day we have to thank the god of toilets, right? If you haven't today, go ahead and thank them. The Romans regarded Glossina as the goddess of the main drain. The literal main drain to the city of Rome, all this water. This goddess was Glauca Maximum, aka Big Drain. Eventually, this god was affiliated with Venus, the goddess of beauty and love. Yeah, love me some big ass drains. Nice. That's a lie, actually. As a kid, I was so afraid of the bathtub drain. I would pull it and then just immediately high jump out of the tub. I don't want to get sucked down like Ant-Man. Know what I mean? Number 6, death before combat. With most of these Roman gladiators, they're trained, they understand a specific style of combat, and they're paired with an opponent that's somewhat equal. And then hundreds of people go, yeah, and they bet on you and then see blood and stuff. It's horrible. But not all these gladiators are UFC fighters, okay? Not all of them are Kurt Russell and handsome. No, a great amount of these gladiators were criminals who were forced to fight each other in the name of entertainment, or they were slaves. Yeah, these prisoners of war were not really on board with fighting a lion with a dagger, believe it or not. They understood this was a one-way trip most likely, so many of them took their own lives before the combat even begun. This one story is quite haunting, but it makes total sense. Sadly, 29 prisoners, they were all set to fight these crazy animal battles in front of thousands, but they all strangled each other. They all took each other's lives with their bare hands because that was easier to them than walking into this nightmare publicly. That's horrible. The reason this was the easier choice to make, sadly, was because saying no to the combat or to the games would just lead to an even more painful public execution. So it's a lose-lose, sadly. They sucked. Number 5, loincloths. Going back to ancient Roman and Egyptian times, there we go, 2 for 1. The loincloth was of course used by all. Either that or you would just be naked. I found this neat step-by-step on how to make your own loincloth, and I tried it, and it's way more complicated than I could have ever imagined, okay? We don't have a lot of archaeological evidence because these linens barely made it through a decade, obviously. There's not a lot of bones in them that would hang out over these thousands of years. But ancient Romans would often use leather to make underwear. Can you imagine that? Hot goat skin wrapped around your waist in the sun? Oh, I need baby powder just thinking about it right now. We still use leather today when it comes to undergarments and, you know, zippers and stuff, but that's for another video. We'll get to that another time. Number 4, cesspools. Hey, here's a note. If you're gonna make a massive castle, you need to know where not to build certain rooms, in case you're building a castle. Anyone watching? Like say over a cesspool, as an example. Yeah, don't build anything heavy over here, or else let's talk about it. Cesspools were often placed under floors, which makes sense because, you know, gravity and life and stuff. But you need to make sure those floors are supportive enough, period. That's it. Or else, this will happen. Back in 1183, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire had a dinner in the palace of Erfurt. But in the main floor of the main hall broke open, resulting in a bunch of dinner guests falling through said floor, with even a few drowning again in said cesspool. Yeah, it's a horrible way to go. And then again, in 1326 in England, Richard the Raker had just sat down. The guy hasn't even started his meal yet, and then again the floor beneath him broke and he fell through and drowned in a cesspool. That's like the worst way to drown too. I'd say chamber pots were safer, but when it comes to waste, out of sight, out of mind. Sadly, just get that away from me. Just downhill, Get it out, or else we'll drown in it, probably. Number 3, Roman shampoo. Okay, when my hair grew out over the pandemic, I had a panic attack. I didn't know what the f to do. I had a huge wake-up call. I've never had long hair before. I didn't know what to use in this mop. I still don't. Clearly, evidently, all I had growing up was the classic 4-in-1 shampoo for guys. That wasn't working out at all. That sucked. I needed some curl cream, okay? Separate jars of items, not just a 5-in-1 with mouthwash on your head. Those aren't good. Those don't do anyone any good. But the ancient Romans, they didn't have Head and Shoulders back then. What did they do? Well, sometimes nothing. They would dip their hair in cold water, and at public bathhouses also, very public, then they would rub and scrape away oils. Lime water was also used to wash your hair, but that was just as useful as lime wire. Sometimes Europeans wouldn't even use water at all to clean their head. They would rub their head with bran, like just a loose bran, before bed, and then they'd brush it out with a comb in the morning. Yeah, bran. I used dog shampoo once by accident. I thought that was bad. Bran? Be so itchy, I wouldn't sleep a wink. Number 2, ancient socks. Somebody got me socks over the holidays as a gift, and let me tell you, last year, I became a man. I was like, thank you, I actually love this. This is now the best gift of my life. Socks and lip balm, that's it. I don't want a PlayStation, get lost. Socks in ancient Greece, first of all, they weren't, the ankle socks. There weren't Vans skateboarding socks. There weren't the weird grippy ones that kids have. Where were those growing up, first of all? Not even close. Socks came around in the 8th century BC, and it was made fresh from animal hairs. This led to Romans tying animal skins around their feet, and then, tying it more and more and more and higher. Anything to keep it there. Now cut to the 2nd century AD in ancient Rome, the sock game finally got real. Romans began using fabrics instead of animal skins. It was now softer, it was lighter, and then later in the 5th century, socks were worn only by the most holy, which is kind of ironic because socks have holes in them. You get the joke, there it is. Socks were associated with the church. They were considered a symbol of purity. Socks would go all the way up your leg back then. Like I said, a little different than the New Balance ankle socks we got today. A little less holy. Finally, number 1, public bathhouse. This last one, okay, we haven't moved on from this at all. That's why I wanted to finish this list. Nice little fresh, fun reminder from Taylor McWaters. Here we go. We still bathe together, a lot. We go to water parks and we swim around in pools filled with pee. Ancient Roman bathhouses were the older, slightly yuckier versions of water parks. They would literally spread intestinal parasites. They were actually way worse. In these massive rooms with giant pools just lie disease, nude, there were and everyone was sweaty and it was all tight and there was no filtration system. It was like an indoor hot tub without the pumps or the salts. It was gross. The Romans were literally figuring out sewage systems at the same time, which I of course mentioned earlier, but they were also the first to create heated public baths. Yeah, my above ground pool wasn't heated, but the ancient Romans, they had heated pools. Great, I gotta send an email to my dad this afternoon. Now I'm pissed. The archaeology and anthropology department at Cambridge discovered that Romans brought lots of parasites to Europe. Yeah, the fossilized feces showed that these heated, relaxing, rejuvenating bathhouses nearby were all but. Yeah, they were horrible. They were just spreading hot disease, coming in hot. I don't mean to undermine the ancient Romans. To be fair, they also brought with them lice and fleas. Ayo, this one for the road. Kicking off the list at number 10, astronomy. You ever want to date somebody, but they're a Libra and you're a Gemini? Oh, ain't that the worst? Look, dating apps even have this now as a feature. You can write down what your symbol is, like, hi, I'm Kyle, I'm a Leo, and I love waking up early. Those are real bios for real people, and we have the Mayans to thank for all of this. The Maya studied the stars. They were the pioneers of our calendar, which I'll explain a little bit later on, but they also created lunar months. They figured that 81 lunar months added up to 2,392 days, meaning that one lunar month is 29.53 days, incredibly close to our modern moon month, which is crazy. They nailed it that long ago. They also studied Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury. They studied where each planet travels to and when. If you're a Libra, like me, smash that thumbs up. I'm a late Libra too. We're just trouble. We're the worst of the worst. Number 9, the Mayan calendar. It's 2022, which means the world thankfully did not end in 2012, but the Mayan calendar predicted that on December 21st, 2012, apparently it would be this massive doomsday. No meteors hit, that was all false, that wasn't a real thing. Thanos didn't snap any of us away, nothing like that happened. But that day did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long count calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. Okay. The Mayan calendar is extremely accurate. Their calendar is 10,000ths of a day more exact than the calendar that the world uses today. They're that precise. We have leap years and stuff just to try and correct it. They used 20-day months and had 2 calendar years. They had a 260-day sacred round and then a 365-day year. Every 52 years, these 2 calendars would coincide with one another, and this was referred to as a bundle. Imagine if we still had this now, that'd be so confusing. But 10, 9, 8, what are we saying? 7. Number 8, chocolate. When I visited the UK, the first thing I noticed was how much better your chocolate was. So good. I'm not sure what y'all are doing over there. Maybe it's just made with love. Who knows? But I'm a huge chocolate guy, and the UK nails it. Yeah, wash it down with some iron brew. Buddy, what a day. What a great day. The Mayans as well, turns out they loved chocolate. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, but the Mayans made it beautiful. They added some spice to it, literally. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water, chili peppers, and honey. They would make a spicy drink. Are you into this idea? Is this making your lips happy right now? Spicy chocolate drinks? My tummy can barely handle a pumpkin spice latte, let alone a Mayan milkshake. No thank you. Number 7. Math. One of the earliest uses of the number 0 being in mathematics came from the Mayans. Thanks, awesome. They were super advanced in their mathematics, I would say for their time, but no, in general they were advanced. We're still trying to understand how they achieved what they did without calculators. It's impressive. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. They didn't have much to work with here, yet somehow it was still enough. The Maya numerical system only had 3 symbols. This was long before Bedmaz was born. They had 0, 1, and 5. That's it. You could literally count on one hand. There's a shell shape, a dab, and a bar. These numbers went from 0 to 19, and then they would count groups of 20. By time 36 BC rolled around, the Maya were introducing the concept of 0 into their numbering system. Thanks guys, I failed math twice because of those zeros. Cheers. Number 6, glyphs. Glyphs at number 6, 6 glyphs. One of the most advanced forms of writing when it comes to all these ancient Americans, the Maya were the most ahead of their time. They invented the glyph, which are these symbols that represent a word or a sound. Like anything else in this civilization, it's beautiful to look at, of course. The Maya used around 700 different glyphs. They're detailed, they're beautiful. A good amount we're able to translate today, but there's still a mysterious chunk that we're trying to figure out. The earliest glyphs engravings go back to the 3rd century BC, meaning that the Maya are the pioneers of writing in Mesoamerica. There are only a few civilizations where writing naturally occurred: the Mayans, ancient Chinese, and the ancient Mesopotamians. Number 5, rubber. Rubber is a fundamental. I mean, sure, the long-term effects for rubber are questionable in turn. Now we have literal pits full of tires, but where did it all begin? And why? The Maya created art, they looked to the stars and made calendars, but what did they do when they wanted to have a good time? Mayan meals were composed of maize, squash, and beans, with tons of crops. Turns out the Maya were the ones who created elastic, long before Mr. Goodyear over here. They made elastic from latex by mixing it with other plants. They really created bouncy balls, if anything. They took latex from trees and mixed it with vine juice. This was around 1600 BC, and you can't invent rubber balls without creating some. Number 4. Ball games. Yeah, imagine inventing a bouncy ball. You can now create any game you want. Any rules. You'll never lose again. How great is that? The Maya have pretty impressive ball courts. These games were all but fun, honestly. These were religious events. These games would last around 20 days on average, so I hope you warmed up that arm because you're going to be here for a while. The pressure was always on, also from the overlords, as these courts were built at the bottom of a sanctuary. Yeah, hey, no pressure, but your ex is here with Zeus. Break a leg. The go-to game was called pocket talk or hodgepodge, and you had to throw a heavy elastic ball through a hoop. Instead of fist bumping at the end of the day saying good game, good game, good game, the losing side would either 1, not survive, dark, or they would have to give over all of their belongings, which also sucks. Yeah, a 20-day game, and then you'd lose all your stuff. That's horrible. What a horrible month. Number 3, art. Of course, we have to mention art. I'm not saying the Mayans invented art by any means. Each of these ancient civilizations had their own way of expressing the afterlife or life in general. Art was just everywhere. The Mayans specialized in decorating stone landmarks. There's only a handful of woodcut art pieces, but the most popular are these stone pieces from Copan and Corregua. They're extremely complex as well, obviously. Look at these. Rock climbers couldn't even get their fingers in these grooves. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. Yet somehow people made them. These zoomorphs here are giant rock sculptures created in the shape of animals, which are always fun. And of course, the Mayans are also famous for their wall paintings dating back to 200 BC. One of the most well-preserved is at Bonampak. Look at this. This is incredible. We often look at Egyptians and their art, but this is incredible too. Often overlooked. Number 2. Laws. The Maya made their own ball games, they made their own rules, they made chocolate their own way, but they also created law and order. In a time where food and shelter was sparse, you would think it would be a lot like the Dark Ages, just a bloody mess, you know, full of thieves and bodies and bad stuff everywhere. Well, when you're the first civilization to create the death penalty, everybody is pretty well behaved afterwards. More than fair. Yeah, fair. Taking the life of others was uncommon because of these harsh laws. I mean, you remember how those ball games would end, right? Yeah, imagine crimes. If you were to take the life of another, say you lost a ball game, all your goods are now gone, you react in a horrible way, well, who comes knocking at your door asking questions? Who says you're now a suspect? Sherlock Holmes? No. Say you live with somebody and they commit a crime. Well, not only are they now gone after they get caught, but the victim also gets your land. They get all your goods, cattle, your home, everything. So whoever lives with you as well, you better pack your rubber balls. You're out of here. You don't live here anymore thanks to Good Game Gordo over here. I'm glad certain things stuck around, like the law and order part, but imagine being evicted because your roommate stole some beans. God damn it, Craig. Don't do that. And finally, number 1, the underworld. Also referred to as the place of fright. Okay, save the best for last, we love it. Xibalba comes from Mayan mythology. Overseen, of course, by the Mayan death gods, Xibalba came to be in the 16th century Verapaz. The entrance to such a wonderful place was in the cave of Guatemala. So, splunkers beware if you're putting that on your agenda, maybe avoid this one. Caves in Belize are actually known as the entrance to Xibalba, these water-filled caves again, and they span as far as 300 feet. That's a massive, evil front door you want to avoid right there. But you can't just grab a snorkel and frog kick your way to the underworld. It's not that easy. According to ancient Maya scripture, the Popol Vuh, this path once filled with dark obstacles, and when I say dark obstacles, I mean dark. I'm talking a river filled with scorpions and blood, combined with houses littered with bats and pure darkness. It's not easy to get through. It's like those haunted houses in Niagara Falls. It's really scary. This is why you don't cheat in Mayan ball games. You end up here. Do you want to be here? No. In fact, if you cheat in Monopoly, I believe you also end up here. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Stacy. Don't cheat.
Number 10. Corral. The sacred city of Corral is an archaeological site considered to be one of the oldest known civilizations in the Americas. The formation of the civilization took place around 3500 BCE and ran to about 1800 BCE. No other site has been found with such a diversity of buildings and architecture and has since been declared a Humanity Cultural Heritage Site by UNESCO themselves. Uncovered around 1905, Peruvian archaeologists provided the first documentation on the civilization at Corral. They appear to have an economy of some sort, selling mostly textiles and fish. The civilization is considered a pre-ceramic culture, since archaeologists have yet to find any sculpted or painted art. However, they did find a system of writing called quipu, which is a string-based recording device suggesting a proto-writing of some sort. They were widely known for their architecture of huge earth-landscaped projects of mounds, particularly a massive labyrinth of underground circular connecting plazas. They were ahead of their time, yeah. Number 9. The Etruscans. Side note, if you dig what we do here on Bumblebee, make sure to Hulk smash that like button for us, huh? The Etruscan civilization was a people of Etruria in ancient Italy. They had a common language, culture, and formed a federation of cities. Their territory covered now what is Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. The earliest evidence of this culture is from about 900 BC. This is the period of the Iron Age considered to be the earliest phase of Etruscan civilization. With a maximum population peaking around 750 BC, the earliest examples of writing are inscriptions found around 700 BC. They developed a system of writing derived from the Euboean alphabet. The language remains only partly understood, making modern understanding of their society and culture heavily dependent on later Roman and Greek sources. Number 8. Inca. The Incan Empire was the largest of pre-Columbian America. The center of the empire was the city of Cusco. The Incans arose from the Peruvian highlands in the late 12th century. The Spanish began their conquest of the empire in 1532, and by 1572, the last Inca state was fully conquered. Before they fell, the Incas were able to construct one of the greatest imperial states in history, accidentally. Without the use of a wheel, knowledge of iron or steel, or even a system of reading and writing. Yeah, these guys were good. About all 14 million of them as well. The empire included construction of monumental architecture, stone and road work reaching to all corners of the empire, and even finely woven textiles. They functioned without money and without markets. Instead, exchange of goods and services was based on individuals, groups, and rulers. Taxes consisted of a labor obligation, usually construction. Everyone was either lifting or carving, you know? The Inca rulers would even grant access to land goods and celebratory feasts for the workers if you did a good job. Dude, this place sounds awesome. Sign me up. Number 7. Indus Harappan. The Indus Valley Civilization, aka the Harappan peoples, was the first urban civilization from roughly 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE. Located in South Asia, modern-day Pakistan, and northwest India, the Harappans built dozens of sprawling cities with immense planning and architecture. I'm talking water supply systems with recycled drainage, large skyscraper-sized buildings. They even developed a number of technologies, including one of the world's first systems of weights and measurements. New techniques in metallurgy producing copper, bronze, lead, and tin. These people were smart. In addition to math and engineering, the Indus Valley Civilization enjoyed arts and crafts. Even games and toys have been found. Baked brick houses, clusters of large iron non-residential buildings, and handcrafted metallurgy. We start to see the foundations here, people. There are even 3 cities here that are now all UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The latest, in 2021, the Cilician Desert. Number 6. Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a Semitic group of speaking people who emerged around 3000 BC. The term Phoenicia is ancient Greek, meaning a colored dye. It's debated whether Phoenicians were distinct from the broader group of speaking peoples known as the Canaanites. The term Canaanites loosely corresponds to the groups referred to as the Phoenicians, so it's a little messy back then on who's exactly who. The Phoenicians rose in the mid-12th century following the decline and collapse of the late Bronze Age. They were renowned as traders and mariners, becoming the dominant commercial power around. They developed an expansive maritime trade network, helping the exchange of cultures and ideas between Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. They established colonies and trading posts across the Mediterranean as Phoenician society and culture centered around mostly commerce and seafaring. As a kicker, of course, historians and archaeologists revealed this civilization most likely has the world's oldest verified alphabets. I can't even build a boat now, let alone back then, with barely an alphabet? Like how? Number 5. Egypt. An ancient civilization in northeast Africa, situated on the Nile Valley, somewhere around 3100 BCE, splitting Upper and Lower Egypt. First occurring as a series of stable kingdoms, separated by intermediate periods such as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, Egypt was invaded by a number of foreign powers, including the Libyans, the Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, and of course, the Greeks. Predictable flooding meant a timed surplus of crops, which supported larger populations year after year. The many achievements of these people include immense quarrying, surveying, and construction, using a system of mathematics and science to build and organize what we still visit today. Medicine, irrigation, boat making, the Egyptians did it all. They pushed the boundaries with glass technology, and even invented new forms of literature, and even coined the earliest known drummed-up peace treaty. Yeah, don't even get me started on the Sphinx. Have you seen this thing? It's practically being held together with glue and tape at this point. Number 4. Mesopotamia, the land of 2 rivers. Around 10,000 BCE, in what is now modern-day Iraq, some of the first fully developed Neolithic cultures began to settle in this fertile crescent, known biblically and famously as Mesopotamia. Around 8000 BCE, people in northern Mesopotamia began to cultivate barley and wheat, in which made beer, gruel, soup, and eventually even bread. This is where the earliest signs of civilization began. They were the first to develop trades such as weaving, leatherwork, metalwork, masonry. One of the greatest achievements of ancient Mesopotamia was the invention of the wheel, sometime around 3500 BCE. Mathematics and science was based on a numerical system of 60. This is the source of the 60-minute hour, the 24-hour day, and the 360-degree circle. The Sumerian calendar was 3 7-day weeks of a lunar month. They were so smart, the astronomers could predict eclipses and solstices. Beer, a calendar, and some wheels? Life was simple back then, huh? Like just not a care in the world. Number 3. The Maya. The Mesoamerican civilization of the Maya was roughly between 1800 BC and 900 AD, located within the archaeological site and the city of San Juan Teotihuacan municipality in the state of Mexico. This site has been classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas with a population between 125,000 and at its peak, millions, making it at least the 6th largest city in the world during its reign. The Maya script is the most sophisticated, highly developed writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Hieroglyphic writing was being used by the 3rd century. They are known for their art, math, calendars, and astronomical systems. Architecturally, the city consisted of palaces, ceremonial ball courts for sport and sacrifice, and of course, structures precisely aligned for astronomical observation. Number 2. Rome. In modern history, ancient Rome refers to the Roman civilization from the founding of the city in the 8th century BC to the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. It encompasses the Roman Kingdom, Roman Republic, and Roman Empire. It began as an Italic settlement. The settlement grew into the city of Rome, eventually controlling its neighbors through a combination of treaties and military strength. It eventually dominated and acquired much of Europe, and of that, the surrounding Mediterranean Sea. One of the largest empires in the ancient world. At one point, roughly a quarter of the world's population. Contributed to modern language, religion, society, technology, government, warfare, art. Do as the Romans do, right? Its military created a system of government which was the inspiration for modern republics such as the United States and France. They achieved impressive feats, such as the empire-wide construction of bridges, ports, and roads, as well as the monuments and megalithic buildings splattered all around the world. Every time I flush a toilet, I'm like, man, these guys were good. Number 1. Turkey. Located in the foothills of the Taurus Mountains, we arrive at Göbekli Tepe. This Neolithic site lays in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey and is dated around 9500 BCE. The site consists of a number of large circular structures supported by massive stone pillars. Long story short, it's the first construction site of anything. Ever. The pillars are richly decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic carvings of people, clothing, and wild animals, thus providing archaeologists insight into this prehistoric peoples and what they were about. Considered the oldest permanent human settlements anywhere in the world, historians link this revolution to the invention and precursor of agriculture. Göbekli Tepe is a monumental complex built on the top of a rocky mountain far from any known sources of water, and having produced no evidence of agricultural has sparked numerous debates over the years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, described it as the Earth's first temple ever, a sanctuary used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from all over the world with no permanent inhabitants. Classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2018, radiocarbon dating shows that the earliest exposed structures at Göbekli Tepe were built around 11,500 years ago. It's regarded by some as the archaeological discovery of many lifetimes, since it could profoundly change the understanding of the development of human society and when it exactly started.
At number 10, Treaties of the Vessels. I think that most of us love the idea of uncovering some kind of lost treasure. I, for one, would love to pull an Indiana Jones and uncover artifacts lost to the sands of time, but realistically, you need a lot of clues in order to find these things. They could be anywhere. The world is quite a large place, you know. That's why ancient texts and documents are so important to researchers, because sometimes they can give clues as to where some treasures might be. This is sort of the case with the Treaties of the Vessels. This ancient Hebrew text claims to reveal the location of where the treasures of King Solomon's temple are hidden. Well, sort of. The text discusses the location of the treasures as well as the fate of the Ark of the Covenant, which is a chest that is said to hold tablets engraved with the 10 Commandments. And as you would imagine, these are highly sought after, but no one knows where it is, and the Treaties of the Vessels isn't really much help to researchers. The text says that the location of these things will, quote, not be revealed until the day of the coming of the Messiah, son of David. So it just teases us with this mystery. We still have to wait to find these treasures. At number 9, Gospel of the Lots of Mary. Have you ever wished that you could know the future? Maybe you want to know how a relationship would play out, or if you should do something about your career, but you just need that little confirmation of future events to help you along. Well, if you lived in ancient times, then you might have sought out the Gospel of the Lots of Mary to help you with your needs. This ancient text is quite the gospel and dates back to around 1500 years. The Gospel of the Lots of Mary doesn't discuss the life of Jesus Christ, but instead contains 37 oracles that were written pretty vaguely. The original text was written in Coptic, an Egyptian language, and has been translated in modern times. The book opens with the words, quote, "The Gospel of the Lots of Mary, the mother of the Lord Jesus Christ, she to whom Gabriel the archangel brought the good news. He who will go forward with his whole heart will obtain what he seeks, only do not be of two minds." End quote. Researchers believe that this book would have been used for divination in an attempt to seek knowledge of the future. Someone in need of answers would seek out this book, ask a question, and then would have gone through a process that would randomly select one of the 37 oracles to give answers to said person's problem. Almost like how we read horoscopes, but much more mysterious. Before we carry on talking about these strange and mysterious texts, why not leave a big ol' thumbs up on this video if you are thoroughly entertained so far, and while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one and join the hive. At number 8, Liber Linteus. This next ancient text almost counts as a hidden message because of where this text was found by researchers. The Liber Linteus is an ancient text written in Etruscan, a language that was used in Italy in ancient times. What makes this text so mysterious is the fact that it was found preserved in the wrappings of an Egyptian mummy that dates back around 2200 years. This ancient text's meaning isn't exactly clear, partially because the Etruscan language isn't fully understood, but researchers believe that the written text on the mummy's wrappings are of a ritual calendar. More research is needed to fully decipher this mysterious text, but it's a really cool find nonetheless. At number 7, Gospel of Judas. Guys, we might have quite the plot twist on our hands, and it's all thanks to this mysterious ancient text. Researchers found a 3rd century text that they called the Gospel of Judas, and after being translated might have revealed an alternate version of an event from the Bible. Originally written in Coptic, the Gospel of Judas seems to be a depiction of Judas Iscariot, the man who betrayed Jesus in the New Testament, in a positive light. In the New Testament, Judas was said to have betrayed Jesus by revealing his identity to those who had come to arrest him in exchange for 30 pieces of silver, but in the Gospel of Judas, it describes Jesus as asking Judas to betray him in order for him to be crucified so that he could ascend to heaven. This plot twist is debated among some people though, as other researchers have said that the text actually declares Judas as a demon. Either way, it's a new spin on the story that we didn't have before, and I'd say that's pretty darn mysterious. At number 6, Grolier Codex. Imagine owning something that you believe was just a piece of art turned out to actually be an ancient artifact. This kind of thing is actually a lot more common than you'd think, since over the years, pillaging and looting of ancient sites have led to many artifacts being misplaced and sold around the world. This is the case with the Grolier Codex. The Grolier Codex is an ancient Mayan codex that contains Maya hieroglyphs, illustrations of gods, and a calendar that tracks the movement of Venus. Wanna know where they found it? In a club in New York. The person who acquired the codex, a Mexican collector named Jose Sanez, said that he got it from a group of looters in the 1960s, and after a lot of debate, it was found that the codex that he had was in fact authentic. Researchers found that this ancient text was written on paper that dates back about 800 years and was written using paint known as Maya blue, which actually wasn't synthesized in a lab until pretty recently. I think it's pretty crazy that this ancient text from the Mayan civilization somehow ended up in New York and no one really noticed. At number 5, Popol Vuh. Just about every civilization has their interpretation of Earth's origins. Some cultures believe that cosmic beings made the Earth, others believed in various gods and various motivations for creating life. One ancient text that was discovered by researchers tells the story of the Maya and their belief of how the world was created. This ancient text, known as Popol Vuh, which ultimately is translated to Book of Council, is a mythical origin story. According to the tales written in this ancient text, the forefather gods, quote, brought forth the earth from a watery void and endowed it with animals and plants, end quote. The text also describes how the gods had difficulties making humans and tells the story of how they created two hero twins who went on a series of adventures and even defeated the Lord of the Underworld. The earliest surviving copy of Popol Vuh dates back to 1701, but it is believed that there were earlier copies of the text that might not have been found or have been lost. At number 4, Copper Scroll. Next up, let's talk about another ancient text that discusses the existence of a large treasure. An ancient Hebrew text called the Copper Scroll was found in a cave in the Judean desert. This ancient text is believed to contain recorded details of a vast treasure that may include gold, silver, vessels, and coins. The Copper Scroll dates back to sometime around 70 CE, which coincides with a time when the Roman army laid siege to Jerusalem and the Second Temple, a Jewish holy temple which stood on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, was destroyed. Researchers are still unsure if these treasures described in the Copper Scroll actually exist, as it is still highly debated. Even if these treasures really did exist, it could have already been found back in ancient times, but even still, no treasure as large as the one described in the scroll have been found in Israel or Palestine. At number 3, Dresden Codex. For researchers, being able to find ancient texts is very exciting because it can teach them a lot about a civilization, its people, and their beliefs. However, they're often pretty hard to come by due to a number of reasons like poor preservation, warfare, looting, and more. In the case of the Mayans, many of their artifacts and written documents were believed to have been destroyed by Christian missionaries trying to wipe out any non-Christian beliefs, so when one of their ancient texts is found, it's a pretty big deal. When the Dresden Codex was found, it was a huge accomplishment for researchers. The Dresden Codex is an ancient Mayan document that dates back 800 years and contains 39 sheets of text with beautifully drawn images and text on both sides. Researchers done on this codex indicate that it is a record of the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya, quote, would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. End quote. The codex first appeared in Germany in 1730, but no one really knows how it got there. At number 2, Voynich manuscript. Now this next ancient text is pretty mysterious simply because no one can read it. Dun dun dun. That's right, the Voynich manuscript, a 250-page book containing illustrations of plants, cosmological symbols, and naked ladies, is carbon dated to have originated sometime in the 15th century. It also contains unreadable text. This book was first discovered in 1912 by an antique book dealer, and since then, the text in the book has yet to have been deciphered. There is speculation amongst researchers that suggests that perhaps the language in this book is a lost language or code, or perhaps just gibberish. However, a recent study of the book's language suggests that it does have the hallmarks of a real language. You know what I think the Voynich manuscript is? An alien document. Think about it. Aliens came to Earth and they documented what they saw, like native plant species and humans, hence the drawings of women, because come on, how can you not be obsessed with women? Right? And these cosmological symbols found in the book would also be tied to the aliens because of course they're from outer space. But what do you guys think? And finally, at number 1, Handbook of Ritual Power. Saving the best and most mysterious ancient text for last, we have the Handbook of Ritual Power. This is a 20-page ancient codex that dates back around 1300 years and is written in Coptic. What's so interesting and mysterious about this little book is its contents. Within the 20 pages of this ancient book are magic spells and formulas, including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and even instructions on how to perform an exorcism. It's believed that this ancient text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who praised Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. What adds to the already mysterious contents of the book is the book's opening, as it references a mysterious unknown figure named Bactiotha. A translation of the opening text of the handbook reads, quote, I give thanks to you and I call upon you the Bactiotha, the great one who is very trustworthy, the one who is lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents. End quote. The book is now housed in a museum in Sydney after they purchased it from an antiquities dealer in Vienna. How this dealer acquired the book though remains unknown.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Olmec colossal heads. The Olmec civilization has often been referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and from somewhere between 1400 to 400 BC, the civilization rose in the Mexican Gulf Coast. Now, over 2 millennia later, in 1862, a farmer was digging that very same land that they once lived on, and he came across an extremely large stone head. From here, research continued, and this turned out to be one of 17 stone heads that are thought to have been portraits of the rulers at the time. The statues are all somewhere from 5 to 10 feet tall, and they are extremely heavy. Like heavier than a full-grown elephant. I guess that's how we're measuring weight now. Some use imperial, some use metric. I use elephants. The reason it is believed that these stone heads were made to model rulers of the time is because they all share similar features, but they are each made with different expressions, slightly different facial features, and different headdresses. While the first discovery of the stone head was close to the source of the basalt stone that was used to make them, most of the heads are like 60 miles away from there. So we have absolutely no idea how these ancient people were able to make these stones. We just know it wasn't an easy task by any means. In our number 9 spot today, we have the works of old men. The works of old men are structures that were first observed from the air by a British pilot in 1927, and they are located near the Azraq Oasis in Jordan. There are hundreds of these wheel-like structures that are each over 80 feet wide, some even as large as 200 feet. These huge structures have been dated back so far that they might just be the oldest man-made creations that we have ever found. While this is all amazing, we have absolutely no idea what they are or why they were created. The theories range from things like sun tracking, to cemeteries, to some sort of spiritual relevance, but we really just aren't sure. While things like this are incredible finds, and it's amazing that some of the first man-made things still exist on our Earth, it is so crazy how we have no idea what they are or how to use them, and unfortunately, especially because of the fact that it's been thousands and thousands of years, it's most likely that the mysteries surrounding them are totally lost with the past. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Siege of Masada. The Siege of Masada took place in 73 AD after the fall of Jerusalem, and it was one of the final events of the First Jewish-Roman War. The event took place on and around a large hilltop in what is now current-day Israel, but here's where this ancient mega project comes in. The Romans began to build a massive earth ramp on the western side of the fortress of Masada. They managed to build it all while under the constant fire from those defending the area, and it was still just under 2,000 feet long, and it rose up 200 feet in the air. After building this ramp, they then managed to push a siege tower up the ramp. This ramp does mostly still exist, and basically what they ended up doing was like extending the size of the mountain that Masada was built on. It is absolutely insane that they did all of this just to capture people. All of that for like 960 people. Imagine if we had ancient Romans now. Suddenly all of our cities would be actually accessible. Ramps for everyone. In our number 7 spot today, we have Stonehenge. Perhaps the most famous of all of the monuments on this list, this prehistoric monument is located in England, and it is a set of stones that are oriented towards the sunrise on the summer solstice. This stone monument is thought to have been created somewhere from 3000 to 2000 BC, and it truly is one of the most famous landmarks ever. Stonehenge is thought to have been an ancient burial ground right from early in its creation for somewhere around 500 years. There are many theories surrounding this incredible monument regarding who could have created it, as experts just aren't quite sure. Since this was from a time before we had written records, we may just never know. Maybe this one is just destined to stay a mystery. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Yonaguni Monument. Just off of the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, there is a diving location that was first discovered in 1986 by a diver. He noticed some strange sort of formation that was located on the seabed that looked as if it could be some sort of structure, so he swam down to go and investigate. When he went down and didn't find any more answers to his questions, he of course had to spill the tea on what he had stumbled upon. When researchers heard about this, they ended up diving down to check out what this formation could be, and thus the Yonaguni Monument was officially considered discovered. This monument, which kind of resembles stairs made for giants, is made of sandstone and limestone, but there's one super mysterious thing about it. Experts cannot agree on the origins of this thing. Some people believe it was a naturally occurring formation, while others swear that it was man-made. The Yonaguni Monument is at least 10,000 years old, so at the end of the day, anyone's guess is as good as mine. In our number 5 spot today, we have Sacsayhuaman. This site is located in Cuzco, Peru, and it is another fascinating and seemingly impossible stone structure that was built by the Incas. This structure was once believed to have been a fortress, but now it is believed that it may have actually been used for things like ceremonies. Why this is another incredible creation is because of the fact that we can't quite figure out how it could have been built. The stones in the structure fit together so perfectly that they are able to stay together without anything holding them in place, and they've done so for years. This, coupled with how large some of the stones were, is enough to completely stump experts. Despite how well the stones all fit together, apparently they all have different shapes, which has led researchers to believe that the building design was kind of made up as the structure was being built. Imagine that, just improvising building a structure and it lasts for hundreds of years and goes on to stump humanity for a while. I'm just saying, that's pretty cool. It becomes more and more apparent how talented and brilliant the Incas really were. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Nazca Lines. If you were to head to the Nazca Desert, just about 200 miles southeast of Lima in southern Peru, you'd find the most famous geoglyphs in the world, the Nazca Lines. Researchers believe that these lines might be something like 2 millennia old, and other than how they are incredible works of art, they are also completely baffling. The geoglyphs are more than 800 long white lines etched into the desert, as well as 300 geometric shapes and 70 different animal figures. The biggest shape stretches about 1,200 feet across, which leads to my point about why these lines are so incredibly fascinating. These images can only be fully seen from high above in the air, so think thinking back 2,000 years ago, how did humans make these without the vantage points we have now? I'm not exactly sure, but it definitely is nothing shy of amazing. In our number 3 spot today, we have Göbekli Tepe. This is a pre-pottery Neolithic archaeological site that is located in Turkey. This site has been dated back all the way to somewhere from 9,500 to 8,000 BC, making it the world's oldest known megaliths, which is just incredible. The site is comprised of a bunch of large circular structures that are being supported by massive stone pillars, many of which are decorated with abstract anthropomorphic details and things which has provided rare and valuable insight into the prehistoric religion and the iconography of the times when this was built. One of the most amazing things about this area is that it was first used at the beginning of the Neolithic period, which marks the oldest human settlements anywhere in the world. It has been called the world's first temple, and it was used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from a wide area. Without a doubt, this was one of the best archaeology finds of our modern society, and it gives us just a glimpse into what life was like in prehistoric times. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lothagam North Pillar Site. One of the most incredible archaeological finds in Kenya led to a, well, it wasn't exactly a horrifying discovery, but it certainly was very unexpected. Around 5,000 years ago, a tribe of herders paused by a lake in what is now Kenya in order to bury their dead. This ended up turning into one of the most massive and monumental construction projects Africa had ever seen, which is no easy feat. For 450 years, they dug into the bedrock, piled up slabs of sandstone, and buried their dead for generations with ritual ceremonies, and this led to what researchers now consider the earliest and largest monumental cemetery in Eastern Africa. Here's the one kind of unexpected thing that they found here at this site though. Along with the bodies of those who had passed, researchers also found 405 gerbil teeth at this site. As it turns out, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for this, and it's because they were used to make a headpiece for just one of those who had passed away. This site might not be as large and tall as some of the other monuments like the pyramids in Giza, but what makes them the most remarkable is that this site was made by the people for the people. Not for emperors or kings and queens, it was for tribe members of every age and gender buried alongside each other. In our number 1 spot today, we have Skara Brae. This is an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850, there was a huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. The next day, however, once the storm had passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice part of the cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement. Tests were able to date the site back from 3,200 BC to 2,200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for about 600 years. There were round stone homes here, and the roofs were made out of whalebone and peat. The design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, herdsmen, and traders. While the site is small, the houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time it's been. This little settlement is Europe's most complete Neolithic village, and while it is older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. No one is exactly sure why the residents of this village abandoned it, but it is likely that a change in climate is somewhat, if not fully responsible, and a storm might have been the reason those living here had to leave in haste, which is deduced by how all of their belongings were left behind.
Kicking off the list at number 10, eye patches. Okay, perhaps one of the most notable features of a pirate has to be the old eye patch. If you're a pirate for Halloween and you don't have the eye patch, well, you just look like a hipster. Like, what are you? We don't know. It matters. It's a noticeable detail. But why did so many pirates cover their eyes? Was it because they got poked by Blackbeard? No. You know when you get up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom, then as soon as you turn the light on, you're blinded for a hot minute, you can't even see, your ears are ringing, you don't even know where you are? It takes your eyes 20 minutes to adjust to darkness, so pirates having to go from the deck to under the ship back and forth, they had to keep one eye in the dark. Or else they'd be covering their eyes for most of their shift, which you really can't have when you're running a tight ship. Nobody has the time for that, so cover your eyes and be blind half the time.
At number 9, earrings. When you think about what a stereotypical pirate looked like, you probably think of tattered clothing, hats, maybe an eye patch, and earrings. Well, their style, though pretty odd, also had a purpose, specifically the earring. Pirates were very superstitious, and their earrings followed in their superstitions as well. There were a lot of different beliefs that pirates had about these earrings. Some pirates believed that it could somehow improve or even cure bad eyesight. Why? No clue. Maybe they thought that ears and eyes were connected or something. I mean, they do start with the same letter. Some pirates also believed that the precious metals that their earrings were made of possessed magical healing powers, so maybe that's why they believed that they would heal their eyes. They also thought that having pierced ears would help them with seasickness, and that having a gold earring would serve as some kind of protective talisman, and that if you wore one, you would be protected from drowning.
Number 8. Hooks. Growing up watching cartoons, I've seen many versions of Captain Hook, or pirates that resemble a Captain Hook type villain. They all have the eye patch, earrings, and to make them more menacing, they have hooks for hands. Dustin Hoffman scared the shit out of me growing up in the movie Hook. It's literally called Hook. What's up with this? Well, this wasn't a move by film studios, this was actually historically accurate. Back in those days, they didn't have advanced prosthetic limbs, and when you're sword fighting over loot, well, odds are you're gonna lose a hand or two at one point. These pirates actually got compensation, which is so funny to me, just imagining a pirate filling out an insurance form, that's funny, but their replacement tool was usually a hook, or a peg leg. They would just replace your leg with a singular piece of wood. That was the best they could do back then, and it had to work. Another fun little fact, if you got injured, your payroll came out of everybody's collective treasure. So you better have that athletic stance down and dodge some swords, or else you're getting some shame. A lot of shame coming your way.
At number 7, walk the plank. I'm sure you have no doubt heard of the term walking the plank, right? It is the stereotypical pirate thing to do when you need to get rid of someone, if you know what I mean. Well, we've sort of been misled by this whole walking the plank thing, because rather than it be a method of offing your buddy Joe for not following orders, it was actually used as a method of psychological torture. Now, don't get me wrong, pirates had many other imaginative and gruesome ways of unaliving people, but walking the plank really wasn't one of them. It was actually a relatively rare practice, as pirates like to do their unaliving practices pretty swiftly. Rather than making their unlucky victim walk a plank into the ocean, the most common form of putting someone 6 feet under, so to speak, was through keel hauling. Keel hauling was where you tied someone to a rope, threw them into the water, and pulled them under the boat and up to the other side. Now, you would think that this person could just hold their breath and then survive, but no, not really. Instead, the unlucky soul would be hitting up against the boat and getting shredded by the barnacles on the boat before coming up to the surface. I don't know about you, but after knowing that, I would much rather walk the plank.
Number 6. Maps, books, and gold. Just as valuable as gold and silver, back in the day, maps were a treasure in itself. It kind of helps knowing where you're going, to be fair. Also, pirates need to remember where they left their treasure. You can't really rely on a drunken pirate's memory now, can you? These charts would be stolen, obviously, and in turn, these guys would go on a little national treasure Hans Zimmer pirate adventure. One map in particular from the 1680s, the Spanish Atlas, was stolen, and National Geographic called this stolen map extremely valuable pirate booty. So this treasure's still out there somewhere, and somebody's got the directions. Knowledge was key. They didn't have Siri hanging out all day to answer navigational questions. They even had to steal books. Pirates stealing books. What a scene. Some of these pirate heists wouldn't even involve treasure. They would sword fight and just hope that the books on board were worth the battle. Imagine losing countless crew members and all you got is the captain's daily logs. Just sailing the high seas, roasting William Kidd's girl problems. You're like, what an idiot!
At number 5, marooning. Let's talk about the brutal yet mysterious practice of marooning, and no, we're not talking about Maroon 5. Marooning was a pirate punishment, probably the most dreaded punishment of them all, where someone who committed a serious offense would be taken to a deserted island and then left there. No food, no water, just you and the island. For many, this was a slow and painful death. Being left on an island in the hot sun meant you got badly sunburnt, you had no food unless you could find something in the area, and chances were that there was no fresh water on that island, so you would become dehydrated quite quickly. At high tide, the water could flood the island, or you would be left standing in water up to your neck, and any predators in the area would have seen you as a little snack. This sounds like a terrible way to go. I could not imagine the physical and psychological torment that would come with such a fate. Man, I'm glad I'm not a pirate.
Number 4, pirate curfew. This next one made me laugh out loud while I was reading up on it. It doesn't matter how badass or cool you think you are, even if you're a literal pirate, you still have a bedtime. These guys would straight up abandon their mateys, they would leave them on an island to die, and then sword fight over treasure. But come 8 o'clock, it's time to shut her down. Because it's pirate code, you can't break the code. Captain Black Bart Bartholomew Roberts, he insisted back in 1722 that lights and candles were out at 8 o'clock sharp. If anybody wanted to stay up later than 8, they can go and hang out on the deck. Honestly, I love this rule. I'm here for this. Imagine roommates being on board for this as well. Nowadays, you get the best sleep of your life. Thing is, these guys needed all the time they could get because they had to sleep in hammocks. Not the most comfortable or relaxing environment. A hammock nap, sure, but a hammock sleep every night? No wonder pirates were so angry. It's starting to make sense.
At number 3, cryptic treasure. There once lived a pirate named Olivier Levasseur, and he was considered one of the last great pirates. Over the years, it was said that Levasseur had stolen many treasures of great value and had a large haul of precious finds. Once people finally caught up to him, he was captured and sentenced to death by hanging, but before he died, his final words were, quote, "Find my treasure, the one who may understand it," end quote. And then he threw a cryptogram into the crowd, and that was the last of them. To this day, no one has been able to decipher the code. Some believe that perhaps this cryptic message was simply designed to lead people on a wild goose chase as a final joke. However, in the 20th century, a man named Reginald Herbert Cruz Wilkins, say that 5 times fast, made a breakthrough. He had been searching for the treasure for years and finally found the cave that he believed the treasure was located. Unfortunately, the cave's conditions made it impossible to get through, so the treasure remains a mystery to this day. Can you believe this all started because a pirate wanted to pull a Da Vinci Code on us? Unbelievable.
Number 2, Julius Caesar. Pirates would often take people and demand treasure. They would use hostage situations as a main ploy. In fact, at one point in history, pirates managed to scoop up Julius Caesar. Like the Julius Caesar. The Emperor of Rome went through his fair share of trials, and at just age 25, he was held captive for 38 days with pirates. That's a very long time to hear horrible sea chanties. But pirates demanded ransom for the release of the young man. They set his price for 20 talents, but according to historians, that price was deemed too low from Caesar himself. He actually laughed at it and reminded these pirates that they had no idea who it was they captured. He said to ask for 50 instead of 20. How insane is that?
And finally, at number 1, pirate tunnels. You know the secret tunnel from Avatar: The Last Airbender? Well, this secret pirate tunnel is kind of similar. Below the city of Savannah, Georgia lies a series of underground tunnels that are believed to have been used by pirates. The pirates would use these tunnel systems to smuggle goods in and out of the area, as well as to smuggle captured sailors. It is said that these tunnels would lead directly to the location where the ships would have been waiting in the harbor. Apparently, there is a tunnel that led from a building in town known as the Pirate's House all the way to the river where small rowing boats would have been waiting. It has also been theorized that the Sons of Liberty, a group of people who strongly opposed the British government, would also use these pirate tunnels to meet up and have a little shindig. There are so many mysteries that surround these pirate tunnels, and many of them remain unsolved.
It's an orderless list as we start off with the Khmer Empire. Like a video game, I'm gonna give y'all their stats. So, where? It's across today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. When? 800 to 1400. Strengths, advanced water system, strong economy, natural resources. Weaknesses, uncontrollable population. Rival civilizations, overexpansion. Fun fact, the Khmer Empire only lost one major naval battle in 600 years. Hella relevant, seeing as the Khmer Empire really embraced that whole water is life thing. The civilization had an extensive water network so that their capital city, Angkor, would flourish no matter the season. Angkor was also at one point one of our world's largest cities, covering 386 square miles and accommodating around 1 million people. Very hydrated people, that is. The advanced water system contained a network of channels and reservoirs that utilized monsoon climates to collect water for use in dry season. Each area of the city had 2 channels of water running through it for fresh and for soiled, earning it the title of the hydraulic city by our contemporary historians. The gradual decline of the Khmer Empire can be attributed to 3 main factors: the diluting of their culture through too many new strands of Buddhism, a gradual weakening of their water network, and an overextension expansion that brought them into conflict with the neighboring Ayutthaya kingdom. Alright, one is done now, two for you. Let's check out the Hittites. So, stats, where? Across Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. When? 1700 to 700 BC. Strengths? Expert chariot makers, iron manufacturers, and they had the fortified city of Hatsua. Weaknesses? Drawn out rivalry with the Egyptians, city-states had no political unity, and a slow economical advancement. Fun fact, Hittite battle axes were literally shaped like human hands. Yeah, I know, right? Kinda cool. Alrighty, so these guys at their peak actually rivaled Egypt's kingdom and made them look like a bunch of backwood hicks. In fact, they were the ones who were effing up Egypt so bad, Ramses II had to sign a peace treaty with them, only after they had the world's largest chariot battle, because boys will be boys or whatever. So, how'd these guys manage to slip from historical radar? Well, it wasn't just being assumed into the Assyrian Empire, it was because, like the Khmer, their culture varied considerably between regions and became too diluted to be consistent. Also, like many other forgotten civilizations, Hittite lands were divided up into city-states with no political unity. The Hittite Empire collapsed in 1160 BC after civil war and a scramble for the throne. Scattered and leaderless, a settlement was formed between the Syro-Hittite people, and this was only for a brief respite before they're invaded by the Assyrians in 700 BC. Love saying this next one's name, it's Pumapunku. Stats, where? Tiwanaku, La Paz, Bolivia. When? Somewhere around 500 CE until question mark. Strengths, precision carving and advanced architecture. Weaknesses, being accused of having aliens help. Fun fact, in Amara, Pumapunku means the door of the puma. Pumapunku was a city already abandoned when the Incas conquered the area in 1470. Predating that, we have no idea who built it and what happened to them. Alright, segment done, moving on. No, not really, but could you imagine? Yeah, no, so it was already empty when the Incas came there, and they spared no expense incorporating Pumapunku and the rest of Tiwanaku City into their empire, believing it to be the place of their deity of creation, and where that deity created the ancestral people of all ethnicities and sent them out in the world to populate the respective lands. So, Incas believed the fallen stone portraits near Pumapunku to be the models of those first humans from the creation myth. These stone figures, however, are just depictions from the city's former rulers. The exact origin and age of the site is endlessly disputed. As archaeologists know, Pumapunku was a thriving ancient town originating from somewhere around 500 to 600 CE, and it's got mankind's most incredible stonework. Each is cut in such a precise way that they fit together perfectly and lock into each other. Not even a razor blade can slide between them. Naturally, their perfection is all the evidence ancient alien believers need to grab the tinfoil hat. May recognize this next name, it's Etrurias. So, stats time. Where? Central Italy. When? 800 to 250 BCE. Strengths, construction enterprise, iron and copper trade, urban planning. Weaknesses, poor army, territory desirable to invaders, and locality to Rome. Fun fact, the Etruscans invented the idea of armed and contact sport, or as we more commonly know them to be, gladiators. The civilization reached the height of its power in the 6th century BCE when 12 city-states were allied to be the Etruscan League. Being the first real major settlement on the Italian peninsula, Etruria became the basis of the civilization in late antiquity to follow. They were one of the first peoples to dispose of kings and be ruled by the intelligentsia of aristocrats and magistrates, and their architecture and construction techniques arguably influenced the Romans as much as the Greeks did, as did the city's overall build and stylization. Even the Latin alphabet and the Roman toga have their origins with the Etruscan people. The growing Roman military juggernaut found Etruria too good to pass up, and their League of City-States was annexed into the new Roman Republic in 250 BCE. Alrighty, we are moving on now to the Phoenicia civilization. Stats are, where? Lebanon and Israel. When? 4000 to 332 BCE. Strengths, peaceful and diplomatic city-states, maritime strength, dye and metal production. Weaknesses, minimal military strength, no real capital city or stronghold. And the fun fact is that the ancient Olympic Games started in Phoenicia. So, Phoenicia is known as Canaan in Hebrew and is named after the Phoenicians, a Greek word for purple, due to their production of the purple dye, which would later become the color of royalty and aristocracy in Greece and Rome, and actually a lot of other places. They were the greatest pioneers of sea travel in the ancient world, arguably, and were a peaceful people, never having had a civil war. Equally unknown to many, they are credited with the founding of Carthage, a city that would actually become a major center in both the Carthaginian and Roman empires. This peaceful and diplomatic reputation helped them stave off invasion for a prolonged period, as did their openness to trading and befriending pretty much any nation they came across, as far as Spain and Portugal. Prior to Alexander the Great's conquest, the Persians invaded Phoenicia lands in 539 BCE, but the Macedonian invasion following that was more devastating. After that decline, the Phoenicians became a Roman state in 64 CE and developed a Hellenistic society. Shuffling our way forward, we're now doing Assyria. Stats, where? So, Iran and Syria, when 2400 BCE to 1300 CE, their strengths are technological advances, iron weapons, and emphasis on education, and their weaknesses, proximity to other strong kingdoms, and their administration spread a little too thinly. Fun factoid, Assyria contained several zoos as one of their kings was obsessed with animals. And not only were they the pioneers of animal domestication, but Assyrian unique policy for defeated powers was to not incorporate their people into the nation, but deport them and ensure there's no rebellion under their rule, which is literally the smartest thing I've heard from an ancient civilization. Instead of just taking the whole bunch of people, just leave them there. Exceptions were only made if the individual or group was believed to be of greater use to the Assyrians, such as scholars, because one of the Assyrians' greatest achievements was in education, as the school of Nispus is believed to be the first ever university. The Assyrians were also attributed with building some of the first aqueducts and arches, hundreds of years before the Romans, and introducing the modern idea of keeping time. The final Assyrian demise is shrouded in mystery, but it's believed they entered a dark age in 1300 after constant wars with the Byzantine Empire. After their empire crumbled, their civilization saw a mass influx of Jewish and Arabian people, and in came high taxes on the Christian Assyrians, who mostly folded under the pressure to convert to Islam. As the Assyrians were ethnically distinct from both Arabs and Jews, this effectively ended the idea of being Assyrian. I mentioned this civilization in a recent video and a little bit before. Let's regroup with the Tiwanaku. This civilization proved you didn't need an army to survive. Stat time, where? Bolivia. When? 500 to 900. Strengths, good agricultural location, construction techniques, expert farmers. Weaknesses, no writing system, overuse of their farming land, no military presence. And fun fact, Tiwanaku cities were so grand that when the Incas discovered them, they believed they were made by the gods. So, Tiwanaku had colonized both Chile and Peru. They were a multi-ethnic society who had settled in the upper reaches of the Andes and now are remembered for the remarkable monuments that still stand today, as well as their underground drainage for fresh and soiled water, paved streets, and cities that were planned in a grid system. Tiwanaku became expert farmers and pioneered a method of farming known as flood-raised field agriculture, which used an effective system of irrigation. This well-fed population of over 10,000 allowed the Tiwanaku to expand into many other areas of South America. The civilization was at its peak of its powers in the 8th century, but mysteriously ended in the 9th. No one's quite sure why the Tiwanaku disappeared, but it's believed that they, as well as other similar culture known as the Wari, were victims of a dramatic shift in climate which devastated crops and caused a mass starvation. As they had no writing system, the Tiwanaku are truly a forgotten civilization. Always a fun word to say, Minoan life is next. Stats, where? Crete. When? 3000 to 1100 BCE. Strengths, bureaucratic hierarchy, shipbuilding, knowledge of metallurgy. Weaknesses, weak military, and natural disasters. Your fun Minoan fact is that the Minoans had a sport that involved jumping over bulls' horns. Of all the lost civilizations, the Minoans may be the most mysterious. Arguably the first European civilization, they first settled in Crete in about 3000 BCE and remained isolated there for literal centuries before establishing trades. Minoan culture originally had no centralized government and a flexible ruling system with large grand palaces acting as a key area of administration. Their tombs, known as tholos, were a key architectural feature along with their paved road system, running water, and pottery that were later incorporated by Greek and Roman civilizations. By 2000 BCE, kings had assumed control of the island, signaling the beginning of a bureaucratic system and social hierarchy, and women also played a large role in that society, serving as administrators and priestesses, and they had the same rights as men. It's that kind of unity that made Minoans very remarkable. But womp womp, around 1700 BCE, an earthquake rips create a new one and destroys most of the island's settlements. They managed to recover from this natural disaster, but now had the Greeks and the Mycenaeans threatening trade interests. Their luck got even worse when in 1375, the island's largest city, Knossos, was devastated and crippled the Minoan people, who were dispatched by an oncoming invasion in 1100 BCE. Oh yeah, ladies, homies, and gents, it's Indus Valley time. What are their stats? So where? India, Afghanistan, Pakistan. When? 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE, and in its mature forms, 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. Strengths, extremely advanced, mathematics, and metallurgy. Weaknesses, natural disaster, overpopulation, failed trade. Fun fact, unlike other ancient civilizations, archaeologists have never found any evidence of palaces or temples in the Indus Valley, which suggests that there were no priests or kings. The Indus River Valley civilization of 3300 to 13 BC was also known as the Harappan civilization. They were important innovators, but little is understood about the Indus script, and as a result, little is known about the Indus River Valley civilization's institutions and system of governance. What is 100% known is this was likely the most advanced ancient society there had ever been. So, what could have made it end? Historians believe things start to fall apart in 1900 BC, and by 1700, many of the Indus Valley cities had been abandoned. Trade was very important to their civilization. Their main trade partner was Mesopotamia, and around the time the Indus cities started to fail, Mesopotamia was going through huge political problems and their trade networks collapsed. This would have had a big impact on work, thus money. So some historians think this is what collapsed the Indus cities. Alternatively, Indus civilization collapsed because of changes to the geography and climate of the area. Movements in the Indus River may have changed the direction or caused flood. The main cities were closely linked to the river, so changes would have had a terrible effect and driven everyone out. And last but never the least, we've got Vinca. Last stats round. So, our where is Serbia and Kosovo primarily, but also Bosnia, Romania, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Greece. When? From 5700 to 4500 BC. Strengths, cultural uniformity and metallurgy, and also being insanely advanced. Weaknesses, not trading enough statues. Last fun fact of the video, they were so modern their houses, clothing, and jewelry are all stylistically incredibly similar to ours now. Vinca culture and its people begin in the mid-6th millennia BC, when the second wave of migration came to the Balkans from the shores of Asia Minor to create the largest Neolithic settlement in all of Europe. Research and analysis of artifacts and the settlements revealed that a culture and a community of people that had actually had a very advanced way of life for the time. Until this day, no weapons have ever been found during excavations, and it makes us draw the conclusion that they were not warriors but peaceful and gentle. Remains of houses show traces of insulation against elements, and inside houses were intricate multi-room layouts and water systems. Finding decorative ceramic cups and sophisticated tools all speak to a relatively comfortable lifestyle, as does the mini dresses and the shorts and the fitted pants and skirts and the dainty jewelry. Possibly the most interesting find is the presence of copper objects and metallurgy, which date from well before the Metal Ages began. However, it's the same copper that caused the disappearance of the Vinca culture. While people out here made fortunes on the jewelry and the tools of copper, others used it to make weapons and seize their treasure.
Number 10. The Sins of Our Fathers. Law and Order is not just a hit drama from the 90s with a killer soundtrack, but something that started with the civilizations a very long time ago. King Hammurabi and his code of law comes to mind. But today, we're talking about ancient Persia. We're talking about a corrupt judge named Sisimons. After taking a bribe and delivering a not so unbiased verdict, the king found out and was most displeased. This is one of the worst things to do to another human being, but poor Sisimons was flayed. Or in simpler terms, they done skinned that feller alive. To make an unholy situation even more uncomfortable, they made a chair and used his hide as a material, and made his son sit in the flesh chair to make his own judgments. Can't help but think that you'd be sitting there all day thinking of dear old dad, because you're sitting on top of a chair that's kind of fuzzy, because dad had a lot of back hair. Yikes. Number 9. The Annual Purge. I don't know about you folks at home, but I love the holiday season. For me specifically, Christmas. And to me, the meaning of Christmas is something less to do with religious background, but just good cheer. Spending time with loved ones and friends, and really enjoying a nice homemade meal. I mean, come on, turkey with the stuffing. Can't go wrong there. And honestly, you can't beat a good stuffing. I love it. But looking back at ancient Persia, there was a different kind of holiday. One that also has its roots in less about religion and more about cold-blooded killings. There were Zoroastrian priests called the Magi, and although they weren't Persian, they were somewhat respected in Persian culture. But when a plot to overthrow the king was enacted, the Persians were not too happy, and slaughtered the people responsible for the coup. But just for good measure, they also slaughtered all the other priests in the palace. Okay, but they might have missed some outside in the city and they had to get them too. You know what, how about every year on this day we go on a Magi hunt? So it became a holiday. Every year on the day of the coup, there was a grand feast and then a hunt for the remaining survivors. That's really comforting, that's nice. Number 8. Poaching. It's 2021. We all know it's super uncool to poach. Illegally hunting endangered species for fun, or just one sought after piece of the animal like elephant tusks for ivory. Our Persian friends of the past just might have been partaking in the poaching of rhinos. While in the ancient world the laws of today were not around to protect animals, the reason was still there, and people wanted horns. For some reason, however, people thought that rhino horn held the power to purify water. Thus, it was used to detect poisonous liquids. It's a superstitious belief that actually would be carried on for a very long time. Rhino horn did have other uses in civilizations, but I like to think it was a coolness factor. You can't tell me drinking wine out of a hollowed out horn isn't cool, come on. Number 7, Marvin's room. Hey man, it's okay. We've all been there. We all felt that kind of hurt before. You're drunk, it's 3 a.m. in a big city with lights. She hurt you bad, dude. But you should just call her. Just see if she picks up. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should get really drunk and then come up with a solution and then see if it still sounds like a solid plan in the morning when you're sober. Yeah, when ancient Persians had a big decision to make, they used dad wisdom. Get super drunk and then think about critical events in life that require tough decision making. And when you're sober in the morning, do it drunk, you thought. Being honest was a big part of Persian culture. And when are people at their most honest? So the theory kind of makes sense to me. I just know that when I wake up in the morning after nurturing a case of beer, that last night's thoughts don't always translate well in the morning. Number 6. The land of milk and honey. Another creative punishment for the people who want to lose sleep tonight. A punishment for crimes Persians had come up with was scapism. This is where the Persians would feed a convicted criminal milk and honey. Sounds awesome, right? Well, not exactly. See, they entrapped the person between two boats, and every day they would force feed someone milk and honey. Milk and honey. Milk and honey. Over and over and over again. Also, slathering the mixture of the two on the poor helpless criminal. As time went on, flies and bugs would find themselves interested in a sweet smelling crook. As one must also use the bathroom after all that beautiful rich consumption. A true horror to see, but after enough time, the person who was unlucky enough to be in such a position slowly and painfully died in a bog of their own filth and rodent infested area. Most likely dying of septic shock. I don't even have a joke for this one. This is something that should just be in the next Saw movie. Ugh. Number 5. Ashes to ashes. Here's another fun punishment. Man, these guys are really creative. This one is mentioned in the Bible, so you know it's gonna be good. Basically, the Persians built a tower, and it was filled with ash. Drop criminals into the ash tower, or there were 2 large paddles connected to the turning wheels outside that would churn the ash and victim inside, suffocating on the hot ash, making for a hot and dusty storm of hell and unholy foulness I can't even begin to describe. Like most things in history from this time, it has to be taken with a grain of salt. It could be very true, or not so true, as the Persian Empire did not leave us with much, and most knowledge of them comes from Greeks and Greek historians. But like most stories, there's truth in everything, and if that's even close to the truth, well, that's just not right, man. Number 4. This is Sparta! Despite what a 2006 movie with spray-on abs might mislead you, the Battle of Thermopylae was no laughing matter. It pitted the very brave Spartans against the Persian invaders, and there were a lot of them. Like, really a lot of them. Attack after attack after attack, the Persians were not getting anywhere. It wasn't until one of the Greeks betrayed the Spartans by leaving the Persians on a flank that would result in the destruction of the Spartans. Although the Persians were victorious, it was in a sense a Pyrrhic victory, as the loss of life on the Persian side far outnumbered the deaths of the Spartans. It's a battle that would be remembered for its bravery, and enough to have a movie made about it many, many years later. Number 3. Here comes the boy. So after a failed attack on Greece, Persia was kinda down about that. No money in the treasury meant that the once great Persian Empire was on the decline. So what better time to invade? And that's just what Alexander the Great did. Through a very lengthy campaign that lasted 10 years and a very formidable fighting force, most likely the strongest ever at the time, he shattered the declining Persian Empire. He even managed to capture the city of Babylon. Talk about kicking a guy while he's down. His rule of the Persian Empire unfortunately was short-lived, as he died not too long after that at the ripe old age of 32. Boy, I sure hope I lived to the ripe age of 32. Number 2. The protection of Meow. Before the Persian Empire was no more, they were actually a very powerful empire. So powerful that they wanted a piece of Egypt. This war may have also been started by an insult from the pharaoh, but expanding was probably more likely. What makes this war so notable is the absolute 5-head play by Persia. Persia knew of the Egyptian culture and knew about their idolization of cats. So, to aid them in the invasion, the king advised them to use kitty power. Soldiers were painting cats in the god Bastet in order for Egyptians to not dare destroy an image of their god. More ridiculous than that was the use of live cats. Stray cats were rounded up and kept during battle in order to prevent the very lethal arrow fire. Soldiers still died in battle, but it is said that the cats gave enough of an advantage for there to be a Persian victory. Decent. Number 1. Progressive for the time. Looking back in time, we can all acknowledge that maybe we weren't so nice, and as time has moved on, we've gotten more progressive. When you think of ancient empires, you don't really think of progressive, but surprisingly Persia was for the time. Specifically women's rights. Women were free to move about. They were allowed to work and be higher ups and manage. But probably the most important aspect was the right to own business and property, which their European counterparts simply could not do. Look at you, Asian Persia, way to go, look at you!
At number 10, creation. Every religion and civilization from the dawn of humanity has come up with their own unique stories as to how the world was created. Some civilizations have credited aliens, others have credited a benevolent god, and many of these gods have their own unique ways of creating life. Though we've heard stories of gods creating people out of things like corn or mud or just thin air, I don't think these stories could even compare to the ancient Egyptian story of creation. These ancient people believed that their very first god, Atum, created himself. As such, he had no wife and literally no one else to potentially procreate with, and so to create his and thus create humanity, he busted it. Literally. He just gave himself a 1-2 meat massage and boom. Out of that process, he created his kids Shu and Tefnut. A very fitting name if you ask me. This legend, I guess you could say, created the term the god's hand. And this was used to refer to women back in ancient Egypt, since Atum's hand played the quote-unquote female role in the creation of his offspring. This term was also carried over into other civilizations, like in the Greco-Roman period, so if you ever hear someone say god's hand, now you know where that came from. At number 9, cheating death. These days, if you get caught cheating on your partner, the worst that could happen to you is you break up, or you get a divorce, or maybe even get exposed on social media. But back in the times of ancient Egypt, the punishment for adultery was much, much worse than having your relationship end. Instead, your life would be the thing that ends. Obviously, in any civilization, any kind of relationship can always happen outside of a marriage. The only varying difference is the punishment for it. For the ancient Egyptians, being caught having an adulterous relationship was punishable by death. Pretty harsh for having a sneaky link, but I guess they took their relationships much more seriously back then. One of the most famous cases of a serial adulterer, if you will, came from a man named Peneb, who was known to sleep with many married women and even had his own son join in on his escapades too. As you can imagine, things didn't really end well for them, so if you ever go back in time to ancient Egypt, just be careful of who you sleep with. Before we continue talking about some of the things that your teachers might not have taught you about ancient Egypt, why not leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, Ancient WAP. Last year, there was a huge scandal concerning Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion's song WAP. It's a pretty racy song that had a lot of people up in arms about it, and it was all over the news. I mean, if you ever heard any songs from the early 2000s, then you would know that this kind of musical content really isn't a new thing, and school songs have been a part of society for a really long time, but it might surprise you to know that they even had some risque songs even back in the times of ancient Egypt. Historians have discovered some of these songs, one of which I can recite to you, and it uses some pretty imaginative wording to describe a woman's body. In an excerpt from said song, it says, quote, "The one, the sister without peer, the handsomest of all. She looks like the rising morning star, at the start of a happy year, shining bright, fair of skin, lovely lovely the look of her eyes, sweet the speech of her lips, she has not a word too much. Upright neck, shining breast, her hair true lapis lazuli, arms surpassing gold, fingers like lotus buds, heavy thighs, narrow waist, her legs parade her beauty. With graceful steps she treads the ground, captures my heart with her movement." End quote. Now, it's no WAP, but for the ancient Egyptians, it was pretty spicy. At number 7, the ancient hub. Back in ancient times, people needed some spicy content to make themselves happy, you know? Before we had OnlyFans and the hub, people in ancient Egypt had their own adult content to enjoy during their alone time. This piece of content was called the Turin Papyrus, and it was essentially just a scroll of a bunch of images on it with people getting busy in some frankly unimaginable positions. Like, I don't know when the Kama Sutra was created, but I feel like the Turin Papyrus certainly gave it a run for its money. The purpose of this papyrus is pretty much unknown, but there are some theories to explain its origin and why it was created, some thinking that it had political ties or something. Either way, historians use this document to further understand times in ancient Egypt. At number 6, magic attraction. You know, we can't always have the best game when it comes to finding a partner. Sometimes it can be hard to get someone to go out with you. Many people just don't give up until they succeed, and sometimes that means that they will go to many lengths just to get a date with their crush. This was seen a lot in ancient Egypt, and at one point in later years of their civilization, they practiced magic to attract the one that they loved. Turns out that they practiced voodoo to get someone interested in them, and it was commonly done by men seeking out the woman of their dreams. In one case of this voodoo for love practice, a man had a magician make a voodoo doll of a woman that he wanted all to himself. The magician pierced the figurine with bronze nails and inscribed a tablet on it with a spell saying that this woman would not be able to drink, eat, or be with another man besides the one seeking her out. The spell also supposedly summoned a demon to follow her and pull her hair and intestines until she found her way to him. Sounds a little intense, but hey, I guess that's just what you do when you don't have Tinder. At number 5, sneaky link. In ancient Egyptian literature, women were often portrayed as seductresses. One of the more famous stories telling the tale of a seductress is one called the Tale of the Two Brothers. Essentially, the story goes that a man, his wife, and his younger brother all lived together. One day the two men went out to do some farm work, and while they were out, the one man told his brother to go back to the house to get some grain sacks. When he reached the house, the wife noticed the brother and complimented him on his strength and tried to seduce him. The brother got angry and refused, but told the wife that he wouldn't say anything to her husband about their encounter. Still, she was worried that the brother would snitch, and so she made herself look like she had been beaten up, and when her husband returned, she pretended like the brother was the one who tried to seduce her. The husband got angry and threatened to kill his brother, but in an attempt to save his own skin, the brother told the husband the truth and even cut his bits off and threw his pee-pee into the river just to prove his point, where it was promptly eaten by fish. Unfortunate. The husband then returned home to his wife, where he killed her and fed her to dogs. Not a happy ending for anyone, but it gives you a real sense of how adultery worked back in those days. At number 4, no Viagra. Just like anyone else these days, back in ancient Egypt, sometimes people had performance issues. Impotence was apparently a really big issue for many Egyptian men. It was such a common issue that sometimes it infiltrated their art, and there were some scrolls and statues about it. An ancient Egyptian proverb was created about such a topic that said, quote, "He who is shy to have intercourse with his wife will not get any children." Now obviously there are things nowadays that can help with such an issue, but back then people resorted to prayer and magic to help their little buddies out. Don't really know how well that worked out for them, but it's a struggle that a lot of people face, so at least they weren't alone. At number 3, LGBTQ+. As with anywhere on Earth, there were same-sex relationships, and the same goes for ancient Egypt. However, documentation of such things were far and few. The only 100% clear-cut case of same-sex relationships that was documented in ancient Egypt comes from the story of Horus and Seth. The story goes that Horus and Seth were both vying for the throne, and one night Horus pretended to be drunk while Seth tried to take advantage of him while Horus slept. Not the greatest example, but it's what we've got that's actually confirmed. Another potential recorded gay relationship may have come from Egypt's King Pepu II, who was thought to have had a secret relationship with one of his generals at nighttime. One of the most well-known potential gay relationships from those times though comes from a piece of Egyptian art that showed two men touching noses. Doesn't seem like anything too intimate, but back then touching noses was another way of kissing. The two men depicted though were thought to be brothers, so it's theorized that there was something a little spicy going on there, but we don't have to think about that one too hard. At number 2, dirty insults. What is your favorite insult? Don't be shy, you can tell me, this is a safe space. I guess I have a number of favorites, but one that I quite enjoy is saying that someone's mother is a horker, like in Skyrim. Back in the times of ancient Egypt, however, insults often included some kind of note. If they needed to hurl an insult at someone, they might say something like, quote, "May you copulate with a donkey," or "May a donkey copulate with your wife." People would also combine some kind of note with pointing out someone's flaws to create an insult. In a note found from one of the people who built one of the Great Pyramids, they insulted one of their co-builders by saying, quote, "You are not a man because you cannot get your wives pregnant like your fellow men." Like, damn. That's pretty cold, dude. And finally, at number 1, the magic pee-pee. Now, I had to save this next fact for our number 1 spot because it's probably one of the most bizarre things that I've ever learned about ancient Egypt. The Egyptian god Min was the male fertility god, and let's just say that he was quite unique. He was known for his bold feathered headdress and the fact that his loincloth snake was always being charmed, if you get what I'm saying. Men suffering from impotence would make offerings to him to help them with their fertility problems. Even to this day, figures of the god Min are used in magic rites. Men and women still visit the ancient temples to find figures of the god and literally rub his to overcome their problems. Sounds strange, but apparently so many people have done it that the stone that it's carved into has become worn down or darkened from how many hands have touched it. Now I can only imagine what this god's body count was.
Number 10, King Henry I. We've all been there. Mostly on holidays where the food was just so good, we couldn't stop eating, we got so full we wish we could die. I personally could talk about food for hours. I have a 10-minute limit with my boyfriend because otherwise it just gets out of hand. True story. What is also a true story is that King Henry I died from eating too much of his favorite thing. Henry loved a medieval delicacy called lamprey pie, a jawless giant leech-like fish that was like sweetened with syrup. It was really gross and weird, but he loved it. He died at Lyons-la-Forêt near Rouen, Normandy in December 1135 CE. He was supposed to go hunting, but had eaten so much lamprey pie that he fell sick with food poisoning. His chronicler, Henry of Huntington, said that he died due to a surfeit of lamprey. He wanted to have his body taken to Reading, which was a monastery he founded with 200 monks. They had to wrap his body in cowhide, cover it in herbs, scented oil, and salt, and remove his organs in order to preserve him for the journey. The man who removed his brain reportedly died due to a strong, pervasive stench. So not only did the king die, he took someone else down with him. Number 9, King Alexander. And no, this is not about Alexander the Great, different guy. Though he did die mysteriously as well. Maybe we'll cover that in part 2 if it so pleases you, let us know in the comments. I'm actually talking about Alexander, who was king of Greece for a while in the 20th century. He ruled for all of 3 years until he died, tragically, after being bit by a monkey. Yep. That's true, yes, a monkey. Not a tiger, not a lion, a crocodile, or a hippo, a monkey. Sadly, this is his legacy. This is all people remember of him. He took up the throne after World War I after his father abdicated because he was seen as pro-German. After the Allies won, a political platform called Great Greece began. Their aim was to capture the Ottoman Empire and seize all of their land. They invaded Turkey, but Alexander was fated for another destiny. He was visiting the royal gardens on September 30th, 1920, and was strolling along with his dog. They came across a Barbary macaque monkey, and his dog attacked. The king rushed forward to separate them, but the monkey had friends. Another monkey rushed forward to protect his buddy and bit the king in the leg, which later became severely infected. Doctors acted too late to remove the leg, and so he died 3 weeks later from sepsis. He was only 27, and he was remembered because he died from being bit by a monkey. Number 8, Phalaris. What goes around comes around. Despite the actual death being very dramatic, it does have a kind of poetic justice to it. Phalaris was referred to as the tyrant of Agragas, Sicily. This guy made cruelty look like an art form. He was known for punishing his victims by putting them into a bronze bowl that he would heat with fire beneath. Yes, I'm talking about the Brazen Bull, a hollowed out bronze bull that would transform the cries of its prisoner into the bellows of a bull as it slowly roasted to death. Cruel entertainment. The first person to be punished was allegedly the designer of the contraption himself. He gained power after taking on the responsibility of building a temple of Zeus. He armed his workers and seized power, but they would soon all regret it. A man named Telemachus eventually overthrew this horrific ruler, and you guessed it, he was thrown into the very bull he used to unalive countless people. Ouch. Number 7. King Richard the Lionheart. Look, we all know I'm on the Richard the Lionheart train because I just finished reading about the Third Crusade. Madness, utter madness. Richard was born for battle. Saladin had never faced nor encountered any warrior like him. They were so equally matched. Saladin was also really awesome. I should do a video about him. Saladin would watch him fight and was in such awe he sent him 2 of his best horses in the middle of a battle. Because such a man should not be without his horse. He would literally like plow through his enemies like a bulldozer, at times falling ill due to the stench of battle but never succumbing to it. He had so many encounters with death that he seemed to be like invincible, immortal even, which is why his death is so strange to me and so anticlimactic. He was walking towards a battlement unarmored, and a vengeful boy took advantage and shot him in the arm with an arrow. Richard jumped on his horse and went to a doctor, but the doctor was terrible at his job, basically butchered his arm and caused him to get gangrene, therefore a death sentence. He had the bowman brought to him and asked him why he was his downfall, and this is where it kind of gets really crazy. The boy replied that Richard had slain his father and brother, and that he would accept any punishment he was given. Crazy. Richard was so in awe of the guy that he ordered instead that the boy not be harmed and instead be given enough money to live out the rest of his days happily. Sadly though, after Richard died, people were so bereft that his wishes were ignored and the bowman was punished and killed. So very, very sad, but what an anticlimactic death for Richard the Lionheart, but also what a proud thing to do. Number 6, Caracalla. I'm going to try and avoid bathroom humor as much as I can, but feel free to go wild in the comments. Have you ever been in the bathroom doing your business and suddenly your mind starts going and you're like, someone could easily take me out right now, you know? I mean, it's not like you can just stop what you're doing, you know, before hands reach out and grab you beneath the stall and you're like, ah, you know, like what a way to go, right? Exactly. Which is kind of why it's bad form to assassinate someone in that vulnerable space. Poor Roman Emperor Caracalla. I mean, not really, though he gave Roman citizenship to free inhabitants. He is considered as one of the most bloodthirsty tyrants in Rome, so not a great guy. His reign is one of the main reasons the empire fell. He made a lot of people angry, let's just say that. In 217, the emperor was preparing for a major campaign against the Parthian Empire. He was visiting a temple nearby when he was stabbed by a Roman soldier who was allegedly angry with him for not promoting him. While this was happening, he was busy relieving himself on the side of the road, and he was just dead. Ugh. Bad form, but also, you know, not a good guy. Number 5, Queen Caroline of Ansbach. I'm not gonna lie, this is not for anyone with a weak stomach, so be careful. This is not a good way to go. One of history's goriest deaths to be sure. Queen Caroline was the consort of George II. She was described as extremely clever, intelligent, strong in character. However, later in life she became overwhelmed with extreme bouts of gout. They became so bad that she had to be wheeled around the castle in an ornate chair. The cause was a strangulated hernia which developed after the birth of her youngest. Eventually the pain became so bad that she couldn't leave her bed. Her womb had ruptured and she was bleeding internally, and then, I'm so sorry, her bowels exploded. On November 20th, 1737, Caroline passed away, leaving behind this epigram. Here lies, wrapped in 40,000 towels, the only proof that Caroline had bowels. Ugh, not a great legacy. Sorry, girl. Number 4, a deadly throne. Metaphorically, a throne can be deadly. Anyone who takes up that much power immediately has dozens of targets on their back. But imagine if it was the throne itself that killed you, literally. Bela I of Hungary did everything he could to get onto the throne. His father, Prince Vasul, had to rebel against his own father to get the throne, though instead he was captured and blinded. So, Bela and his siblings fled until his eldest brother successfully seized the crown. As per tradition in Hungary, the crown was supposed to be passed from brother to brother, but instead, Bela's brother's son was named heir. So Bela organized an army in Poland, marched on Hungary, killed his brother on the throne, and took up his reign. He actually accomplished much in his reign, including including crushing a pagan rebellion and asserting Hungarian independence. But then, in 1063, as Bela was walking up to his throne in front of a bunch of officials and sat down, the whole throne collapsed. The accident left him severely injured and he died from his injuries later on. His throne literally killed him. Number 3, Valyrian. The words molten gold and Game of Thrones evokes a specific image for those who have seen the show, but did you know that they may have been inspired by the real life death of Roman Emperor Valerian? Many rumors as to how Emperor Valerian actually met his fate kind of range, but either way, it wasn't a good end. According to Lactantius, Persian King Shapur I captured Valerian in battle and tormented him without mercy. He used him as a footstool, mocked him, flayed him with straw, but the most vicious was the rumor that he met his end by having molten gold poured down his throat. Another is that he was just kept in imprisonment until he eventually faded away into nothingness. His own son didn't even try to rescue his father after he was captured due to humiliation, but also because he was trying to hold back a rebellion. What officially happened to the emperor we may never know, but whatever it was, wasn't good. Wasn't good. Number 2, Georgi Doza. This is definitely the most brutal on the list, so warnings ahead. This dude was literally torn to shreds by people. I wish that was a metaphor, but it's not. Georgi Doza was a Transylvanian nobleman who led a Hungarian peasant rebellion against their lords. He went down in history as both a criminal and a Christian martyr. He was appointed by Pope Leo X to lead a crusade against the Ottoman with an army of 40,000 volunteers, mostly peasants. The nobles failed to supply the crusaders with what they needed, and soon the peasants began to revolt against the nobles. Doza agreed with their grievances and organized a massive rebellion that led to all-out war against the nobles. Noble manors were ransacked, nobles were tormented and unalived, but soon the aristocracy began crushing back the rebellion, and 70,000 rebels were tormented to death. But Georgi got it the worst. He was first forced to sit in a hot chair with a hot crown fixed upon his head, and then 9 of his followers who were starved before this were forced to well, let's just say, make a meal out of him. Yeah, not good. Not good. We don't like that. Number 1, William the Conqueror. Just recently, I went to see one of my favorite comedians, Eddie Izzard, and through her show, I learned that William the Conqueror exploded. He exploded! I couldn't believe it, so I had to look it up, and yup, it's true, folks. We have not 1, but 2 people on this list that exploded internally. William ate as much as he conquered. Not only was he a glutton for land, he was also for the finer things in life, the finest foods, and the spoils of war. As a result, the Duke of Normandy grew in impressive size. In 1087, while riding his horse, it reared unexpectedly, and due to his size, he was unable to balance, and the saddle pushed so hard into his abdomen that his intestines were punctured. Doctors didn't have the means to perform surgery due to his size and their tech, so eventually the king succumbed to his injuries, dying 6 weeks later. 6 weeks? That's a long time. But it doesn't end there. Oh no! He was so disliked that his corpse was abandoned until a wandering knight took on the deed. By the time his body finally arrived in Caen to be buried, it had been weeks. The bacteria festered in his intestines, filling his body with putrid gas, and as the gravediggers were lowering him into his grave, the hole was too small to fit his now inflamed massive corpse, so they tried to squeeze him in by jumping and pressing, and in typical Monty Python fashion, he burst and exploded all over the crowd. So no, he didn't die by explosion, but kind of internally, and then again, so it counts. But what a weird way to go, and what an even weirder way to be buried.